Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this is our 11th RegTech webinar, and today we're talking all about the General Data Protection Regulation. We call it a regime because we think it's an all-encompassing act, which is really one of the biggest things that the industry has seen in data protection. Just for those who don't know us, Engage Insight are a compliance and business development and people development consultancy. We've been going now for over 5 years, and we're really focused on ensuring firms are compliant, client-centric and sustainable. And essentially, we support professional development across regulatory, business and people development needs. And in February this year, we launched our RegTech Digital Compliance and Business Development Platform Model Office, where we now have over 50 users and a growing community. And Model Office, MO for short, covers all your business and business people development needs, and hopefully making compliance far much more easier to understand and implement and engage, less like a visit to the dentist. Just a few housekeeping points on here for you. If you haven't used this technology before, this is join.me. Hopefully you can all hear me and you can see my screen. If you can't hear me, then there is a dial-in number, as you can hopefully see with my cursor up here. Please dial in and you should then be able to hear me. And also we are recording this call, this webinar, so we will host it on our YouTube webinar channel, our RegTech channel, and then we'll send you all a copy as well, so you'll get copies of the presentation. This is me. Again, it's only me, and again, I need to change my photo because I'm not smiling very much. My background is in wealth management. I've been in wealth management for over 20 years, both in the UK and internationally, and then before that I started my career at Friends Provident, who are mutual in the insurance sector. So I've been in the industry for about 26 years. We've now got a team at Engage of 6 people, and ranging from compliance experts, business development experts, and people development experts. We do have a number of hosts on these meetings, but today, as I say, it's just my good self. We will, over the next half an hour, discuss really the background, in this particular case, to data protection, look at the key components of why we are where we are with the GDPR, look at your key challenges and the key challenges that we see as we go in and we work with banks, wealth managers, IFAs, so work with financial planners. So from that perspective, we're seeing a lot of challenges around the GDPR. So obviously we'll cover what we're seeing there, and then we'll take a look at some solutions and top tips from that perspective about how you can start to look at and make sense of all this regulation that's coming your way to make sure that you're building robust, client-centric and obviously compliant businesses on an ongoing basis. And finally, I'll cover Model Office, MO, and the RegTech platform that we have and how that will help you, in this particular instance, look at the GDPR, but MO obviously covers everything from MiFID II, SMCR, suitability requirements, treating customers fairly, know your client, and AML, etc., etc. Now, I always use this slide a lot, actually. I mean, this slide is on a FCA business report, annual report, business plan. I think it was 2014 that was produced. But the interesting thing from this in conduct risk, because FCA, as their name, conduct, they're very much focused on what conduct and culture is and getting that right. It's a move into professional development, if you like, within the industry. What they're very interested in more ways than one is obviously stopping the poor business practice and moving people more through a constructive cultural environment. And really they're focused on drivers for change. And one of the key drivers for change, as you can see from this particular is the record keeping, which is just around about 4 on there, which they are viewing as one of the larger key issues or challenges, if you like, to conduct on an ongoing basis. And record keeping, as you'll see, is a big part of the GDPR. GDPR and what the GDPR now demands. Why the change? Well, certainly we are seeing the fact that as in the EU, the European control to their citizens around data protection and data usage. The key issue as well is stopping data abuse, as we'll talk about in a little while. And also handing to the industry what they want the industry to have is clear controls, legal and a standardized structure of operation moving forward. The key issue that we've got at the moment, as we've talked about, is reigning regulations across the industry, and one of the key issues that we've got with the GDPR is Brexit, and is that going to have an impact? Well, the good news or bad news, depending which way you look at it, is it's not. The UK has signed up to the GDPR, so it's going to have to be implemented in May next year, despite what happens with Brexit. The other issue as well is that there's obviously a big push regarding what Amazon and WhatsApp and encrypted social media services are up to in the marketplace. You've got all the issues surrounding cybersecurity. So, for example, the WannaCry software at the NHS, which nearly brought the NHS down. You've got on with Google. All the things that are to do with big data is really what the GDPR is focusing on in more ways than one, and it's really trying to protect the consumer, protect the citizens in a way, and giving them far more rights around what they can do with their data and what businesses can and can't do with their data. And of course, the big push in our industry with fintech and regtech, I guess, is push around wealth management or wealth tech and fintech, the robo-advisors that are coming through. Anyone using or aggregating data have to be signing up to the GDPR, and our view on it is because the GDPR is quite forensic in its approach, quite granular in its approach. For these type of firms need to be getting their head around it now, but also the more traditional financial service firms also need to do that as well, as we'll see as we move through the presentation. To start with, let's look at a scene setter, really. For those of you who are familiar with the Data Protection Act, which came through in 1998, that was an all-encompassing act, which really was originally designed around data protection. Obviously, it's in its name, and it had 8 principles. Number one, personal information must be fairly and lawfully processed. Personal information must be processed for limited purposes. Personal information must be adequate. Personal information must be accurate, all the way through to personal information must not be transferred to other countries without adequate protection. Now, the issue with the Data Protection Act, it was fit for purpose, over a decade ago, but coming through with the move through with the fintech and the big data and the data aggregation platforms that we've now got. Basically what we've now got is a situation where data is the new oil in more ways than one. And it's very, very highly coveted by business for obvious reasons. But obviously, that brings a whole bit of new responsibility for the industry, hence why the GDPR is really focused on a more forensic view of data protection. The Data Protection Act in itself, had monetary penalties of up to £500,000, signed undertakings all about reputational issues, and the key issues with it was obviously the unauthorized disclosure of personal data and information. But can you say, was it too loose in its construction? Well, you could say that's the case, because what we've had is a lot of breaches, and we'll go through some examples in a while on data protection, not just in financial services but throughout industries. And the research that's been done out there is showing that it's human error which is the number one cause of such breaches and lack of data protection in organizations. And human error, it could be mistyped email addresses, it could be use of personal mobile devices accessing data incorrectly. It could be cloud-based sharing, the security isn't as tight as it should be, unencrypted endpoints, lost paperwork, and obviously lost disks, people leaving data files on trains is a classic example. So human error is a big one. Then you've got software corruption is number 2. Virus attack, number 3, as we'll talk a little bit more happened to the NHS in a little while. Hardware error is number 4. Then you've got sabotage, number 5, and natural disasters, number 6. So human error really is right at the top, and the GDPR really does focus on that quite intensely. For those of you who were familiar with what happened to the NHS, this is the example. Now, the key area here is to look at which of the following is valid from an email that was sent through, and those of you with keen eyes, I'm sure, will focus on the left example rather than the right example, because if you look at the email, it's comms@wmas.co.uk versus comms@wmas.nhs.uk. And it's important to mention here that this is very common. And so someone clicking through on that click link, which is also a giveaway, you know, when you get spam email through with a big click here in different fonts or different colors, that's a big giveaway. And then obviously some unfortunate individual would have clicked through that and then it kind of crashed the system. Now you can argue that, well, look, the NHS systems aren't fit for purpose, they're not up to date, they're not uniform, etc. That's fine. But the issue is that staff now need to be highly trained on spam, and obviously what we're looking at here is phishing and whaling examples of cybercrime for obvious reasons. So again, we'll touch on what the GDPR is really focused on from that perspective. This is the WannaCry ransomware that came through and took down the NHS for a time. And there's no reason why that can't happen with retail financial services for the reasons I've just talked about, where someone will click on some unsuspecting individual will click through a link, and unfortunately then the virus will hit and it will take the system down. So you know, and the WannaCry ransomware is actually something that can be bought on the internet through the dark web, and that's exactly what happened. Someone bought the WannaCry, decided to target the NHS, sent it through via an email, and as you can see, you know, the email address was slightly different, and then people, unfortunately, one bad decision was made, and the rest is history, as they say. Another example which you may be familiar with is TalkTalk, which happened a couple of years back, and TalkTalk were really they were really guilty of not encrypting the data, and that led to around about 100, I think it's 157,000 customers were affected. Their bank accounts, their dates of birth, their addresses were all accessible to the cyber crime criminals out there, and in the end they got a fine. I think the ITO fined them £500,000 or below that, 400k. And obviously that was had a huge impact on that. And as you'll see from the fines from the GDPR, it's far more than the Data Protection Act, so that's a big issue for us also to take on board. So we're now with the General Data Protection Regulations coming through in May next year. Key changes: clearer requirements, more individual rights, which is really the centre of this. Higher consequences of non-compliance. We know this won't apply to good sales, obviously, but it's pretty officious, with fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of total worldwide turnover of the preceding financial year, obviously whichever is higher. So from that perspective, it's a very, very serious issue, and a very serious piece of regulation that we all need to take note of. There's a high emphasis now on a data protection officer role, and for those of you who are smaller firms thinking, well, this isn't necessarily going to affect us, well, we would actually argue that it will, and you really need to be taking a look at who you can allocate that particular or outsource to to get that function sorted sooner rather than later. Manage your data breach notification, demonstrate compliance, privacy, impact assessment. So those are the key changes coming through, which is all fine. But what does it mean? What do we need to do about it? Well, the data protection, the general data protection regime and regulation covers anyone who possesses or processes data pertaining to clients, really. In our case, contacts those individuals by email, phone, SMS, or mail, and tracks their engagement on an ongoing basis. So pretty much it's everybody. There are two key people in Article 4 of the GDPR, which is the controller, and I'll just quote this for you. The controller is the natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or other body which alone, jointly with, determines the purposes and means of processing data. So that really is, it's specified data processed. And then you've got the processor, is a legal person, public authority, agency, which processes personal data on behalf of the controller. So it's the person or body that conducts the data processing itself. Very important for us to get our head around that. And then what we've done at Engage Insight, and is now incorporated into our digital compliance technology model office, we've got the 7 principles here, which is all about lawfulness, fairness, transparency. Open and honest website disclaimers are now very important to put into place. You demonstrating that. You've got the client consent, which is opt-in, opt-out. The client rights you need to build in, which is their right to be forgotten, their right to portability and right to erasure, making that very clear to how clients can do that. Purpose limitation. The key area here is that you're using the data for what you're stipulating you're going to be using it for, and you're gaining client informed consent for client agreements. So we would argue that GDPR needs to form part of your client agreement, and we write client agreements for IFAs, wealth managers. So we're incorporating that into those client agreements in terms of business. Data minimization. So look, it's not war and peace. You only need to gather the data that's needed. So again, that's important. So you're not collecting absolutely everything that you think you need to try and cover your back. It's not about that. It's just collecting what data that you actually need and holding it for the length of time that you need to hold it for. Data accuracy obviously is crucial, particularly those of you who are employing client portals, because obviously if clients are going on and seeing their names misspelt or their dates of birth wrong, national insurance number wrong, that's kind of crucial. So looking at making sure data is clean. Storage limitation, retention policy and criteria for deletion is obviously important to get right. And then finally, integrity and confidentiality. So cybercrime, what happens with loss and breach and unauthorized usage as you go forward. We did conducted a webinar a couple of weeks ago now on the senior management certification regime regulation, which is coming through next year as well. And interesting there is looking at the broad role overviews, which are now needed within firms large and small, and certainly one of the key areas is a data protection officer and chief technical officer, and that really is now something for all firms to look at. Who is going to be responsible for this? If you're a smaller firm, who are you going to outsource to? And making sure all the due diligence and research is done correctly to meet GDPR, but also the SMCR. The challenges that we're seeing in the market at the moment, obviously, is around, who is responsible, as I've talked about, the systems that you have, the operations that you operate, and the procedures that you have within the business. So what you obviously need to be doing is identifying and looking at remediation of data quality is crucial across that, looking at the flows across your business. If you're operating a centralized investment proposition, how the data flows, how clean is it, how easily does it flow, and how easily can you get to grips with what the data is and how it works and understand it from a GDPR perspective. Impact on the business, obviously accountability is crucial. We're looking at new hires within the business now, so larger businesses are looking at getting CTOs in place, data protection officers in place, and you need to be demonstrating competency at all times. And duty of responsibility is really the delegation of responsibilities and who does what, and collating the data, getting the recording right, and proving that you're doing this to the regulator on an ongoing basis. We've also got issues surrounding IT processes, so we've got to focus now on more rigorously IT data flow, appraisal processes, looking at straight-through processing, how that works if you've got a straight-through processing system with your practice management technology and the platform product provider that you're using, making sure that's all fit for purpose. If you've got a CRM system that you're using, making sure all that's up to date and captures all the relevant information that you need under GDPR. New additional legal risks are involved. So, shock horror, we're also recommending that you speak to a lawyer who is up on the GDPR, who knows the legal requirements for this. And again, that will probably be an outsourced job, but that is very important just to get a legal view on your position with the GDPR. Training programs are now going to be very important, and you'll get lots of people offering training on an ongoing basis. The most important thing with training is embedding it in the culture of the business. So from that perspective, we'd want to ensure that you've got a right training program and it's ongoing. You're certified, you've got a certification process in place to ensure people are up to speed with the GDPR, know what it is, how it affects them, their job, their business, and really talking about embedding it in the culture of your business. So let's move on to key solutions. So we've got 6 areas here which we're talking to a lot of firms about in the marketplace. Firstly, the first key, if you like, is to ensure that you've got a corporate register. That could privacy policies, procedures, and documentation in order to keep them up to date. Really focused on understanding the terminology that you're using, making sure it's plain English. A key theme of this is accountability. Who does what in the business? Who monitors the data, reviews it, assesses it to make sure that all the procedures are up to date and the data is fit for purpose and meets all the criteria that we talked about earlier on. Governance is really understanding, a governance group in the business. Now, obviously, if you're smaller, you can outsource this. You can talk to consultants like us about it or a place. Really looking at overseas of privacy policies and really become larger actually in this particular area, 250 employees or more who do need to appoint a data protection officer. Smaller than that, obviously, then ideally you need to be outsourcing to ensure that someone has responsibility and accountability for this. The big issue with governance is backup. Make sure you back up your data is a huge issue. Breach processes, making sure you've got a process that if your data is breached at any time, to make sure that you've got protective measures such as encryption and obviously insurance. Opt-in, opt-out is the usual stuff about the right to be forgotten, the right to erasure, and the right to portability, making sure that's in your disclaimers, in your terms of business, so clients are aware of it and know how that works. System cycle is really understanding, create and enforce privacy throughout your system's lifecycle to meet the privacy by design requirement of the GDPR. That's looking at really your software that you employ within the business and services that you've bought, that you're either outsourcing or using within the business, making sure that throughout their life cycle that they are fit for purpose and meeting the GDPR requirements. And disclaimers really, you need to be disclaiming all obviously your business contact details, reason for collecting and using personal data, any third parties that you're working with, who they are, the research and due diligence you've done on that. A big key area at the moment, just moving aside from GDPR, is obviously the pension transfer issues at the moment with the FCA focus on that, and the research and due diligence firms need to be doing now on outsourcing to pension transfer specialists is an example of that. So that will be the same with GDPR. Details of retention periods and the customer rights, which is obviously withdrawal consent and the right to lodge a complaint. So disclaimers are pretty crucial as we move forward. There is on the ICO website 12 steps that you can take really to ensure that you are now planning for the GDPR and making sure that you're getting a grip of how it works, what it does, and what it means for the business. So again, you'll get a copy of all this, and I'd warmly recommend that you get onto the ICO website and have a look around and look at all this information that's on there, because it's all very useful, and you can start to formulate some strategy going forward of how you can start to prepare for it, because we've still got some time now coming through so that we can actually get this right for the business. So we need to really demonstrate that we've got an understanding, and then we need to start to demonstrate that we're going to put stuff together so that we are compliant. And Article 5 of the GDPR talks about the controller function I talked about before, that there's two, the controller and the processor. Well, they're saying here that the controller should be responsible for and be able to demonstrate compliance with the principles. So that's going to be crucial to get right for the business. And what we're talking about there is a requirement to implement appropriate technical organizational measures, maintaining records, data protection impact assessments, requirement to appoint a data protection officer for those firms who are larger. But again, for your smaller firms, you need to be looking at who's accountable here, data protection by design and default, and codes of conduct and certification regime, which is really ongoing training to make sure everybody's up to speed with the GDPR. We've got here a task list which you can take a look at, which looks at, as I talked about, embedding it in a culture assessment of your business. Don't really, task list is probably the wrong wording, because what we don't want you to do is have a checklist mentality, tick box mentality to this. It's really about a cultural move with the business regarding that. It's a similar thing with the SMCR. It's all about a cultural shift. Analysing a change program. So we're big on project management here at Engage, and it's really starting with the end goal in mind, and then working it back about what you need to be doing to get there. Define who are the data controllers and processes we talked about. Clarify reporting lines and current responsibilities. Test how current responsibilities are delivered. Conduct an audit using our 7 principles, for example. So Model Office's 7 principles, which you can use and start to test the business and self-audit and self-assess the business with through our RegTech platform. You've got the investing in data loss prevention systems, cyber protection solutions. There are insurance companies out there who are now offering this. We were at a practice management technology firm conference earlier this year, and there was a stand there with the cyber protection solution. Create mechanisms to monitor and assess compliance on an ongoing basis. So again, that sounds pretty obvious, but firms need to do it, need to walk the talk on that. Just some ideas on home defenses, really, we're calling this. If you're using personal computing, well, obviously you need to back up, you need to encrypt, you need to have antiviruses, you need to make sure you're on the latest software within your systems, whether they're personal or at work. Be wary of emails containing link or attachments we talked about. Good password management is crucial. Don't use your same password across everything, and update it regularly. That's very important. Have a system to update it so you don't forget it. Very important indeed. Or use software. There is software out there that you can actually sign up to, which enables you to remember your password and update it. Check websites for HTTPS. Very important. If you're on, for example, Facebook, and it hasn't got the S after the P, don't go on there. It means it's not secure. Always ensure if you're in a pub or a cafe and you're on their Wi-Fi, that HTTPS is in place, because if it's not, people will probably be attacking you at that moment in time. So what can you do to prepare? Just kind of finalizing. Well, look, there's lots of resource out there, the resource that we can offer, the resource that other consultancies offer, there's a resource that the ICO offer. The most important thing is to start to doing things, start to put things into motion, start to think about it, start to look at, what are these 12 steps we talked about earlier on? What are, for example, Model Office's 7 principles and that you need to start to apply, and how can you do that? Looking at the EU guidance that's out there, and what does it all mean? What we've also got is the key issue of, what we don't want to do is put you in a rabbits in the headlights scenario. So really what we're talking about there, the best place to start is always with a self-audit. It's always really looking at the business cross-section, from a cross-sectional point of view, and looking at what data do you have, what are the purposes, what legal bases do you use, and who do you share the data with. So, for example, a lot of good work with financial planners, financial advisors, wealth managers, where they're teaming up with solicitors and accountants on professional services. Now, the key area there is how are you sharing that data, and how, most importantly, are you going to protect that data uniformly across the services that you're jointly offering. So that's a classic example of where you now just need to start looking from that perspective. Model Office, for those of you who don't know, is a first of its kind digital compliance business and people development software, which allows you to assess your business from a 360 point of view and really brings a balanced scorecard across the key issues, across the 5 keys you can see here. But the key that we're talking about today is your systems. And your systems is really about these, each key has business functions, and your systems, the area that we're really focused on is the last one, which is data flow, quality and security. And I'll just give you a very brief look to finish off of looking at how Model Office can help you. So in this particular dashboard, which is key 4, you've got your systems, operations and service support. The data flows and quality and security focuses on all sorts of areas. In this particular area is the data protection regime. You're asked a question around what you're doing regarding the data protection regime, and you can see here that really Information Commission's Office GDPR overview. Well, here then you click on that and it will take you straight into that website. So throughout Model Office we have resources that you can actually access, and you can go and find out a bit more information before you answer the questions to make sure you're up to speed with the latest regulatory thinking. And then you answer the question and then you press next and you move on. The next question here is looking at client consent is clear and opt-out clearly available, incorporating right to data portability, and that's a yes, no. So you can answer that and move on. And then the final example I'm giving you here is looking at a corporate register is in place to monitor privacy policies, procedures and documentation. And again, you answer that accordingly. At the end of that process, you will get a score across all the keys. And what Model Office will then do is give you a deep dive strategic report, which you can download as a PDF, and it will give you all the resources that you need to get up to speed on what you now need to do. But most importantly, what Model Office is designed to do is designed to be prescriptive and give you guidance around, well, so what? I know where I am. I know what kind of like the areas that are my blind spots, but what do I need to do next? So that's what Model Office will do for you. So it's encouraging, and what we're doing is encouraging you as a business to ask the right questions across the business to make sure that you're going to be up to speed with all this regulation rain that's coming through, but most importantly, enjoy the process, because there's so much rich material that you're going to get out of going through these exercises about the business and where it's going and how it's going moving forward. So that's a brief high-level overview of the GDPR. Hopefully that gives you a bit more information. What we'll now do is we will sign off. We'll put this onto our RegTech channel on YouTube. We'll send it out to you so you can view it again. And if you want more of a deep dive approach around the key areas that we've talked about, or give Model Office a try, there's the URL that you can look at. And it's a beautiful day where I am. Hopefully it is where you are. And I hope you have a great weekend. And thanks so much for joining us on this call.